She was shouting into the hot air long before anyone heard her. Her voice broke under the hot sun. It felt like the desert wanted to hide the sound. The young woman was tied to a wooden frame in the middle of the empty field. Her leg was pulled high by a rough rope. Her dress was torn, and her skin was hurt by the dust and wood. She kept trying to fix her dress with her tied wrists, but every breath made her feel more ashamed. The worst part was not the pain. It was the fear that no one would see her as anything other than a broken body left for the birds. She whispered for help, even though she knew the desert was cruel. Rooker's men had tied her up and rode away laughing. They said the heat would make her admit to things before night arrived. But there was nothing to admit. There was only a truth she feared would die with her if no one heard it. Finally, a shadow moved in the distance. A rider came closer, moving slowly and carefully. Dust rose behind the horse's feet. She prayed it was not one of Rooker's men coming back to finish the job. When the rider stopped beside her, she saw a pair of tired blue eyes under an old hat. Elias Thorne did not speak at first. He only stared in shock at her, hanging in the hot wind. Then his eyes looked down without warning. He looked at the place she wanted to hide more than anything on earth. A feeling of deep shame burned through her like fire. Her voice came out of her throat. "Do not look there." Elias turned his head away quickly. Guilt showed on his face. But he could not forget what he had seen. He could not pretend the marks on her skin were anything other than the work of a monster. Now she had a terrifying question in her mind. Would this man ride away and leave her to die like the others did? Or would he do the difficult thing and risk everything to save a woman he was never meant to see? Elias did not leave. Not after hearing her voice shake like that. Not after seeing the bruises on her legs and the burned mark that nobody should ever have on their skin. He stood there in the hot wind, trying to calm his breathing and deciding what kind of man he was going to be today. Elias stepped closer. He was slow and careful. The woman tried to turn away from him, but the ropes held her tight. She pressed her legs together, whispering again, even softer this time, "Do not look there." Elias swallowed hard. He lifted both hands a little to show he was not dangerous. "Ma'am, I am not here to stare. I am here because you look like you are dying." His voice was gentle but sad, and she felt it. Most men were liars when they acted like heroes, but Elias did not move like a liar. He moved like a man who had seen too much pain and did not want to add another bad memory to his mind. He walked around the wooden frame, checking the knots. His fingers touched the rope, and he said a bad word softly because the knots were tied to cut into the skin. This was Rooker's style. "All right," he said quietly. She jumped when she heard that name. Elias leaned in and spoke low. "If he did this to you, he planned to break more than just your bones." The woman closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. Elias touched her ankle gently to check her blood flow, and she jumped again. "Relax. I am just making sure you can feel your foot." "I can feel all of it," she whispered, "and I wish I could not." He looked up at her. Their eyes met for the first time without fear. That single look told him everything he needed to know. She was not guilty. She was not evil. She was not anything Rooker had said. She was just a woman trying to survive in a hard world. Elias took a breath and made a choice. "All right, I'm getting you down." Then came the sound that changed everything. The sound of horses running. 2 riders were returning fast. It was Rooker's men. A cold question hit her chest. Would Elias fight to save her now that danger was right in front of him, or would he leave her to save himself? Elias heard the horses, and his old instincts woke up. He did not have time to think anymore. Thinking got people killed. He stepped close to her. "Hold on," he said softly. His knife moved quickly. The rope at her wrist broke free. Pain rushed back into her arms as blood began to move again. She held back a cry. Elias cut the rope on her leg and grabbed her waist as she fell forward. For a second, her torn dress slipped again, and she hissed, "Do not look there!" He did not. He took off his own coat and wrapped it around her quickly. 2 horses slid to a stop in the dust. The first man, a thin guy with bad teeth, smiled when he saw the woman on the ground. "Boss said leave her until the sun goes down. What are you doing, Thorn?" Elias stood up tall, keeping her behind him. His voice was steady. "I am changing the schedule." The second man spat on the ground. He smelled like cheap drink, and his eyes looked lazy. "Heard you used to be a soldier. Thought you knew how to follow orders." Elias smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "That's why I quit." The thin man got down from his horse, his hand on his gun. "Step away from the girl." Elias moved first. He was not as fast as he used to be, but he was strong. His fist hit the man's jaw with a loud sound. Pain shot up his own arm. The man stumbled and swung back wildly, hitting Elias across the nose. Blood started to flow from Elias's nose immediately. The second man went for his gun. Elias grabbed his wrist, but his grip was not quick enough. The man hit Elias hard in the ribs with his elbow, right where an old war scar hurt when the weather changed. Pain exploded in his side, and his knees bent. The gun slipped from the man's hand and fell in the dirt near the woman's feet. Acting on pure panic and pride, she grabbed the gun with both hands. She had never fired a gun in her life, but she pointed it at the sky and pulled the trigger. The shot was loud like thunder in the empty field. Both men froze and jumped back. "Do you want to try that again?" she shouted. Her voice was shaking but loud. "Next time, I might not miss." The men looked from Elias's bloody face to the woman with the wild eyes and the smoking gun. Their courage disappeared. They backed toward their horses, cursing and holding their sore jaws, then rode away in a cloud of dust. Elias wiped the blood from his nose. "Can you ride a horse?" "I will fall off," she whispered. "I will catch you," he said. He lifted her into the saddle. Then he climbed up behind her, holding her firmly so she would not slide. The horse ran forward, past the groaning men, toward the distant hills. As the wind hit her face, she tried to breathe, but the world kept tilting. Her head fell back against Elias's shoulder. "Stay with me," he said softly. But her eyes were closing. The last thing she felt was the steady beat of his heart against her back. Then the world went dark. By the time they reached the hills, the woman was unconscious. She was hot with a fever. Elias ignored the pain in his ribs. He guided the horse off the main trail to a hiding spot near a river. That night she was very sick. She mumbled words about numbers and boots on her throat. He put a wet cloth on her face and neck to cool her down. He gave her water a little at a time. Once she whispered weakly, "Do not look there." He swallowed hard. "I am not looking. I am just keeping you safe." By the second morning, she was breathing better. She felt weak, but she also felt safe with him. He treated her with respect. He set her down on a blanket so she could pull his coat tighter around herself. "I'm going to look at that leg," he said quietly. She stiffened. "Not there." His eyes met hers. "Not for me, for you." He kneeled by her side, keeping his eyes on her face while he fixed the torn cloth. Only when she nodded did he look down to see the damage. The skin around the mark was swollen and bruised. He let out a slow breath. "That man should be in prison," Elias said. "That man owns half the cattle in town, and the law eats dinner at his table. Is that why he did this? Because you saw too much?" She laughed bitterly. "I saw his men stealing cattle. I saw more cows than anyone reported missing. I told him the numbers were wrong. He said my eyes were the problem." She paused. "Next thing I knew, I was tied to that frame. He made sure everyone would talk about my shame, not his theft." Elias cleaned the wound gently. "You did not have to come back for me," she whispered. "Maybe not," he said, "but I saw what he did to you. If I rode away, I would be no better than him." They sat there as the sun went down. Two people who were strangers that morning were now connected by a secret. The woman, whose name was Sarah, asked, "Elias, what will you do when Rooker comes looking for you? Run? Or ride back into town and show everyone his crimes?" Elias thought for a moment. "When I was young, I was a soldier and did what I was told. I watched men get hurt because I looked the other way. I promised God I would not do that again." He added, "But we are not riding into town tomorrow, not with you sick and me tired." Instead, he took her to a small farm in the next valley. It belonged to Ben Miller, an old friend who owed Elias his life. Ben looked at the mark on Sarah's leg, and his face went cold. By the next evening, 4 more men were at the table. They were all old soldiers who hated bullies. They sent a message to the fort with the names of men who saw the stolen cattle. They hired a photographer to take a picture of Sarah's injuries as proof. A few days later, Elias and Sarah rode back into town with their friends behind them. Rooker stepped out of his office, looking red-faced and confident. He called Elias a fool and a criminal. That was when Sarah did the hardest thing she had ever done. Her hand shook, but her voice was strong. She stepped out in front of everyone, the wives, the workers, and the preacher. "You told him not to look at me," she said. "You told all of them not to look, because if they did, they would see what you are." With Elias beside her, she showed the mark Rooker had burned into her skin. It was proof that the rich man was cruel. An officer from the fort, who had come because of the message, stepped forward. By the end of the week, Rooker was arrested. He was led away in chains. Later, Sarah stood on Elias's porch. "You know," she said softly, "if you had ridden away that first day, I would have died thinking I was nothing but that mark." Elias shook his head. "You are not the brand, Sarah. You are the hand that holds the iron." This story is not just about cowboys or cattle. It is about a question everyone must face. When people tell you not to look, do you look away? Or do you look straight at the truth and stand your ground?